Good morning and welcome to our community affairs program that we call 30 Minutes. Today our special guest is Miss Sherri Hanna. She is the Executive Director of the Obion County Emergency Communications District, or as we know best, 911. It's a pleasure to have you back on the program.
Charles, it's a pleasure for me to be back on the program.
Sherri always brings such good information about the 911 service, which is so important to this area, and she always has updates and new things that are happening, and we will get into those. But as we do each week with the 30 Minutes program, we like to let our guests introduce themselves. So Sherri, I'll turn that over to you.
Good morning again, Charles. I'm Sherri Fisher Hanna. I'm the director of Obion County 911. I was fortunate to grow up in Obion County, and I am so very proud to be part of the emergency services and representing them today.
So you're a lifelong resident of Obion
Pretty
County.
much.
Yeah.
My family and I moved a little bit when we were young because of my dad's career path. And then we came back to Obion County in 1974 and have been here ever since.
And I'm seeing here, because, again, you are the Director of 911 in Obion County, that you recently celebrated a big anniversary.
We sure did. 31 years of service. Our service date was February 4th, 1991, and that's the day we first took a 911 call here.
How was 911 and why was 911 established here in the county?
Well, 911 had taken hold over across the nation. One of the things is that at the point that 911 came into being, we really had no means of dispatching emergency services except for everybody called 7-digit phone numbers, and you had to know what department you were trying to call. There were different numbers for police, there were different numbers for fire, and numbers for EMS. And when it came to the volunteer fire departments, one of the big challenges were they're volunteers. They don't have a staff base of operations. They might have a phone in someone's house, and if they were there, they'd pick it up. Or, in the case of Hornbeak Fire Department, as former Chief Bob Revis always tells us, they would have the 10-digit number ring into the jail. Back then, there were 7-digit. We didn't even have to dial the prefix. Yeah. It would ring down into the jail. Bob always says if Shorty Stansberry was on duty in the jail, then he could trigger the Hornbeak fire siren from there. We also didn't have any way to efficiently get to any residents outside of a town because it was rural routes. There were no street addresses. And so by 1988, we were behind the 8 ball by 20 years from the first time a 911 call was placed at Haleyville, Alabama, which happened in February of 1968.
I was going to say not much technology. There wasn't not much technology back in those days.
There was no technology.
And as you talked about, everything was Route 1, Route 2, Route 3.
Exactly. My home address was Route 1, Box 117A. I can tell you what it was. And so, and even in the towns, a lot of them were just P.O. boxes.
Right.
People said, I live here by such and such church, or I live, turn by where the red barn used to be. And so
that's the country style living there.
That is, but it's a great style of living.
It is.
I think that we are having, we have a lot of fun about country style of living, right. But, we're just as tech savvy as anybody else.
Right. In Memphis, you couldn't have done that.
No.
Here in Obion County and around the area, you could.
Correct. And so when my parents got their new 911 address and they told me we had to start using it, I was like, what in the world? Why does it sound like we live in this fancy, ritzy subdivision on South Crockett Bend Road whenever there's nothing but fields?
But it worked back then. They made it work.
They made it work, but a lot of times you did have to rely on somebody knowing who lived next to you. And that's one of the things about small town living. We've gone the way of everyone else. You barely know your neighbors. You don't know phone numbers anymore because they're in your cell phone.
Exactly right. And so who did establish this? Was this established by the county government or law enforcement or?
No, the citizens actually voted on a referendum, and it had to be the citizens that would vote it in that they wanted this. And it was something like 98% of the people who voted wanted it.
So did that establish like a 911 board or something?
After that referendum passed, the next thing was the county legislative body did establish the Emergency Communications District then in 1988.
And where did it start? Is it where you are now to this day?
No. Because we weren't ready for a call center or anything, they were still trying to work out the details of how they were going to approach it, and they met in a room in the hospital for several years.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And then they started looking at locations for us to put the 911 center in. And they had wanted it in Troy, and were looking at buildings in Troy. And then they found out that we could get the old Union City Fire Station too. And the city leased it to us for $1 a year.
With it being the 31st anniversary, you have a tremendous amount of history with it, because how many years have you been there now, Sherri?
I've been over 27. I'll celebrate 28 in November.
Yeah, so you've almost been there, I guess, since the inception of it.
I came in after I was in year 5.
And what drew you to that?
Well, I have a lot of family members that have been in public safety, including my father. And I guess it was, I always laugh because my family was either public safety or outlaws. There was just no real mix, but I was bent towards the public safety side. And I was also working 2 jobs at the time. I was working at Dollar Tree at County Marketplace, and 911 was going to pay me over 50 cents an hour more. And so I went to 911.
So you started dispatching with them?
I did, a part-time dispatcher for 5 years. Every year they would offer me a full-time position, and I'd have to turn it down. But year 5, my circumstances happily changed, and they offered me a full-time position, and I took it.
So you've seen a lot of growth and a lot of change, technology-wise, I guess employee-wise. And
correct.
So when you started, or when it first started, how many employees did 911 have?
There were 6 dispatchers and a director.
And now you have?
10.
10. Mm-hmm. And we're talking 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yes, and whenever I started, we worked 1 dispatcher at a time. It didn't matter what the circumstances were. But it was after I started as director and we moved into our new dispatch center, which is now, it's 16 years old now. Mm-hmm. We moved 16 years ago into the old fire truck bay. We put in our old console as a backup to our new console, and we were working, and there was, on Saturday morning, there was a big lightning strike that hit not in our building, but around the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, and it knocked out our new console. And we had our old console, and it was operational. So at that point was during a 3-day period of getting our new console back up on its legs. We were having someone answer calls, because they could still answer the calls, at the dispatch position, which was 5 feet away. And then someone was manning the radios.
You didn't have computers back then, right?
No.
Everything done with pencil and paper a lot then?
Yes, absolutely. We had our call for service forms, or some, like the Sheriff's Department has their call for service complaint cards, but we have a call for service form, and that's what we did, and we always did them manually. So you kept up with the times for every agency that we dispatched for on that sheet. There was a computer, but it was broken most of the time, and we'd get it fixed, and it would break again. We would be inputting what we could into that computer, but it was old and slow. And then we had a computer for internet purposes later on. But now we have 6 screens that we sit in front of, and there is a possibility that we might have to have a 7th. And we just do it. The technology allows us to have one mouse, one keyboard, so it's a whole different world.
So every upgrade, I'm sure, was a wow moment, right?
Wow and fear and trepidation.
Can I do this? I can understand.
Yes. Yeah. And some people said I can't, and they just ended up not.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And you have 10 on staff. Do you work 12-hour shifts, 8-hour shifts, or how do you do this?
We have a great schedule that we put in place in 2018, and it consists of 4 teams. It's a team structure, and so we have teams that work 12-hour days and teams that work 12-hour nights. So they're team A, B. And then we have 4 10-hour shifts. So we've got teams C and D, 1 in the morning, 1 at night. And so for 5 weeks, they work, one set of them works weekdays. And then there's a transition week. And then for 5 weeks, they work weekends. But because of our team structure, we know for a year in advance pretty much what our schedule is. And so people can plan accordingly with that. We also have a part-time dispatcher who fills in any gaps. And so...
so it gives everybody some time off.
Yes.
Which is needed.
Yes. And and the team structure has worked beautifully for us. Another thing I put into place was that their staggered hour for coming in. Like our days on 12 hours comes in 7 a.m., and then the next one comes in at 8. So they're overlapping, and so someone always knows what's going on.
So are you needing employees from time to time?
We do right now.
Oh, you're needing someone now?
Yes, we actually have 2 openings. We have 2 full-time dispatch openings. We hire through Job World, professional staffing service. Now, one of our vacancies is because Carol Easley, who had been with us since 2014, Carol was my training officer. She was my senior training officer. We did get somebody trained as the junior training officer. But Carol was my right hand since 2019. And she was great before, but she really did a wonderful job. And she decided that she was going to hang up the hat, or hang up the headset, as we say, on officially December 31st.
And she went out with a little celebration there, didn't she?
She did. We have an annual service awards dinner every year in December, and we mainly do it at Discovery Park. And a couple years ago, we started inviting more people to this celebration because we wanted everybody to be able to celebrate our service awards with us. And this year, I asked Carol if she wanted a retirement reception or if she wanted it done at Discovery Park with our service awards. And it was wonderful because about 20 members of her family were able to be there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and so I surely miss her, and I'm still in touch with her constantly. But it's different now, and different's not always bad. But it's just, I do miss her.
And you were talking about needing some employees now.
Yes.
Do you is experience needed, or do you train?
No, we train. That's one of the greatest things about our program, and it's been this way for several years. Tennessee has minimum training requirements. We don't like minimums. And we do have in-house training that we do. And because we also have more protocols that we work, then we have a lot more training. But before we went to the training systems where we had an outside company that did some of our training online, before that we had a big training manual, and it's like 400 pages long. And that's just part of our training. We train in things like hazmat. We train in rail safety. We train in OnStar. Any type of free certificated training we can get, we will go for it. And then plus our regular curriculum. But Tennessee has only a minimum, and minimum for Tennessee is 80 hours. Ours is 3 months, about 500 hours.
So you want your employees to be the best.
We do, and we expect that.
And they are, I'm sure.
Yes, and one of the things that someone said to me yesterday was, when you're looking at this kind of job, you need to look at somebody and say, well, do you want a job or do you want a job with a purpose? And that's the way we feel, that if you want to be in a customer service type job, but it's a job with a purpose, we have a career path now for retirement. We have great insurance. We have great benefits all the way around. And if you want to look at something like that, then by all means, again, we hire through Job World because it took me so long out of my day to have to screen applications, and they are professionals at it. So if somebody wants to look at it, then by all means look at it. We are looking for a couple of good folks.
Well, that's great. Is your budget through the Obion County government? You stand alone?
We are a standalone, but it's an interesting situation because we're a hybrid kind of entity. We are a municipality by statute in Tennessee Code, but we do not have the power to levy taxes. We can impose certain fees, but here we don't. And because we are not a county agency, we have to do all of our own reporting and everything. And we are fortunate that, so the county commission has to approve our board members that are nominated by the county the county mayor. And the county mayor does that. And so they have the power to approve or reject. And then we have a 9-member board of directors. And then our oversight board is the Tennessee Emergency Communications Board in Nashville.
Wow. Again, today we are speaking with Miss Sherri Hanna. I left that out.
That's fine.
She is the executive director of District 911 here in Obion County. And I'm sure those listening today are wondering, what agencies do you serve?
Well, we serve all of them, but we direct dispatch all 8 fire departments. And of those 8 fire departments, only one Union City Fire is staffed, is 24-hour service. The others are volunteers. We dispatch for the Obion County Rescue Squad, for Baptist Ambulance. We early activate Air Evac Life Team, and when situations they fit the criteria, or there's a lot of things that we just have had enough training, we know this is a time that we need to activate a helicopter. And then we also we keep a good relationship with law enforcement, but Obion County Sheriff's Department dispatches all the PDs except Union City. Union City Police has its own dispatch center. So we answer all 911 calls that generate in the county. And then it's up to us to figure out quickly where they need to go, if it's something we dispatch for or if it's something law enforcement needs first.
Let me ask you this. How did cell phones change the game as far as 911, or did it?
Oh, tremendously. One of the things is that whenever we didn't have many cell phones, we only had landlines, people had to wait till they found a phone to report an incident, and that may be 5 miles down the road. Now we've got cell phones in everyone's hands, and they can call 911. The only drawback about that is there's a big wreck at like the intersection right out here that you hear and see wrecks all the time. Then we get 20 people trying to call 911 all at once.
Oh, yeah.
And even with 2 people that are the best dispatchers in the world, that will overwhelm them. Plus, there may be other emergencies happening at the same time. So one of the things that we do implement is if we have a phone number, we can call back the person. If they have not try to redial 911. If they redial 911, it will disappear off our system because we took the call. But if it's a large event, we will try our best to call that person back and ask, were you trying to report XYZ incident? Yes, I was. Well, we sure thank you for the call. We had multiple lines going. And usually and they're like, that's fine.
I see what you mean. Say out in the country and someone comes upon a wreck. Back when there was no cell phones, they had to get to the, I guess, nearest person's house or find a payphone booth at the time.
Yes.
All right. So that was a kind of a times matter
right
situation.
Now, I do want to give everyone a piece of information that they may not have, is that any dwelling that has been wired for traditional phone service, a landline, is so long as their wires have not been cut anywhere from their dwelling to the street or anything, you can put a dial telephone or touch tone phone, plug it in, and that phone can be used to dial 911. And that is because there's a national initiative, any device, anywhere, anytime. And
on a rotary?
Yes. Yeah. Rotary or touch tone. Push button. You can still dial 911. And that way it will come up with, it says either phone not in service for callback or BST quick service, which was what it originally was, Bell South Telephone. And it can call, and since it's coming from a traditional wireline, then it will show the address. Well, and you can talk with the person if they can hear you.
A lot of people love to text. Can you text 911?
You sure can. We've had text readiness for nearly 2 years.
Do people do that?
Not many. Not many. But and that's what we want them to do. Call when you can, text if you can't. Okay. There may be a situation where they are under duress and they're texting 911, and that has happened a couple of times.
Well, to receive a text, you have to be, I guess, texting another cell phone? No. So someone texts, you have a way to receive it.
Text 911, and it embeds your location. And so we will see your location on a map, and we text back. We immediately start a conversation, just as if, and texting to 911 really was driven by the deaf and hard of hearing community, because they used to have TTY and TDD devices, and now they text. So it's the same conversation, just non-vocal.
What other services do you provide there out of your office?
We are the addressing authority for Obion County. We address in the rural areas, and we address inside Reeves and Woodland Mills. But all the other towns and cities, we have such a great relationship with them about stuff that they'll call to consult if there's an addressing issue, or they are also required to provide us with any address updates, changes, or that. We also, again, we provide counsel for the towns that don't have GIS on staff, and they just need some guidance on how to do it.
You said that
did I say
made
GIS?
Me thinking there when you said addresses. I bet that was a major task.
It was
to get everybody in the county an address.
Yes, and that is why it took nearly 3 years before we could start taking 911 calls, because all the addresses had to be already established.
Wow.
And
so 3 years to get, so everyone had to have a specific address.
That's correct.
So that was a change for the homeowners, for the businesses, and everything. Then.
Right. And so one of the big part of the project, too, was we were going by Route 1, Route 2, up to Route 4. And so they had to name the roads. That is a big thing, was the naming of the roads. And that because the Highway Commission does all the rural work. They were the ones to whom the address or the street names or road names they had to ask for certain ones. That's also why we have so many with a person's name, because their family or their community wanted to honor them. So we have things like Jim Carver. We've got Thomas Russell, Doc Nanny. And
Ralph
we have Ralph Puckett has his own road. And then there are other ones that I think Bates Anderson was a person. So you can look throughout the county and you can see all those names. And that's how they were named, to honor someone.
But not only road names, you had to establish house numbers, too.
That's correct. And once we established, the addressing system is a grid system. And the 0 point is the fountain at the town square in Troy. That's the geographical center of this county. And the map is divided into 1 square mile grids. And the further away you get from that 0 point, the further away you get from it, the bigger the house number. And they established it where 528 numbers per mile they allowed 10 feet per house number.
So you have to know if someone is building a new home or residence in the county, right?
Absolutely. They need to either call our office or they can send an address request into GIS at ObionCountyTN911.gov. And when they request that, we want them to send a map pin. Because of the cell phones, they can push on their map and push a pin where the center of their structure is going to be located. And they can send that pin to us, and we can address off of that.
Wow. That's a lot of little things. Well, that's not little things in your book, but that's a lot of things people don't even realize.
They have no idea.
Right, with the mapping and,
yes.
and all of that. But, I mean,
yes.
It's important. A person builds a new home, and they have to be on there in case of emergency.
Also, we will register storm shelters as well. And that way, if or when we have the next big event, if their storm shelter is covered in brush or something, then at least we'll have coordinates.
Wow. Great information.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. We are close to completing today's program, and boy, it flies by every time you come by to talk to me, Sherri. We may need to do a 60-minute program sometime.
there we go.
Maybe we could get most of it in. But
yes.
As we do each week with the program, we like to let our guest close out with information that you need. And so
all right.
I'll give you the closing remarks.
Thank you, Charles. Closing remarks is, please, when you dial 911, we have a lot of questions to ask you. It does not delay your dispatch of emergency services. We want to make sure that they have all the information they need to have a game plan when they walk into your house. So that's why we're asking so many questions. Another couple of things. Each year, Pastor Tony Keaton and the great folks at Union City Baptist Temple host the First Responder Sunday, during which they have all manner of emergency services have their units out there to touch a truck. And then they have a service and they have awards for the different agencies. And it's really great service. This year, it's on Sunday, April 14th. It'll start around 9, I think. The other thing is, don't forget that those who would like to pursue a job with a purpose in emergency services are desperately needed, not only for our organization, but for all emergency services and volunteer agencies.
If you're needing a job, contact Sherri at the 911 office here in Union City. It's been a pleasure to have you on the program again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charles, for having me on the program. I've enjoyed it once again.
Thanks for all you do. And that concludes this week's 30 Minutes program. We hope you enjoyed today's show. And, of course, we invite you to tune in again next week at this same time as we bring you topics and information of importance to our community. From all of us here at Thunderbolt Broadcasting, until we meet again next week, I'm Charles Choate.
You've been listening to 30 Minutes, a community affairs program on Thunderbolt Radio. You can listen to this broadcast and others anytime by visiting thunderboltradio.com and following the Thunderbolt Radio and Digital YouTube page. Thanks for listening.